Good evening. You're watching the News at 6 with me, Ishan Russell. The News at 6 is all about the day's biggest developing stories, and we'll be filling in on them over the next half hour. But first, the headlines that we're tracking right now. Voting for the first phase of Bihar Assembly polls come to an end. Fate of close to 600 candidates sealed in 49 seats along the Semanchal region. President Pranab Mukherjee begins first visit by Indian head of state to Palestine, reaffirms India's commitment to Palestine's separate statehood while keeping ties with Hong Kong. Shiv Sena vows to carry on protests against former Pak Foreign Minister Khurshid Mahmood Kasoori's book launch, smears blank cake on former BJP leader Sudhindra Kulkarni for joining the event. More writers give up Sahitya Academy Awards in protest against intolerance and lack of freedom of speech. Academy calls for an emergency meet. And KP Sharma Oli takes oath as the new Prime Minister of Nepal, vows to tackle ongoing crisis amid protests by the Madhesi community against the new constitution. Our top story this evening, after a high-pitched bitter phase of campaigning, the first 5 phases of the elections to the Bihar's 243 assemblies started today. Over a span of 2 months, rival camps led by Prime Minister Modi on one hand and Nitish Kumar and Lalu Prasad on the other hand traded barbs and counter-barbs. Here's what happened during the first phase of polling.
The first phase of the high-voltage Bihar Assembly elections have come to an end. Voting for the 49 constituencies from across 10 districts for the first phase started at 7 a.m.
ये तो देश के प्रति मेरा कर्तव्य है, मुझको पहले आकर और वोट कास्ट करना चाहिए।
नौजवानों को रोजगार हो, यही सब है और क्या प्रोग्रेस मतलब होना चाहिए।
मुद्दा तो यही है कि मान ले बिहार में शांति हो, ये गुंडागर्दी खत्म हो, सड़क, बिजली, पानी सभी को सुविधा मिले।
क्या विकास हुआ है पिछले बार, उसको देख करके ही वोट देंगे इस बार।
In terms of geographical size, 1/5 of the state cast their vote in phase 1. 49 seats were contested across 10 districts which include Samastipur, Begusarai, Khagaria, Bhagalpur, Banka, Munger, Lakhisarai, Shekhpura, Nawada and Jamui. As voting started in Bihar, Prime Minister Narendra Modi urged voters to exercise their franchise in large numbers. He particularly exhorted the young voters to cast their votes. Shortly after 7 a.m., the Prime Minister tweeted, urging all those voting today in Bihar to vote in large numbers. I particularly urge my young friends to cast their vote. In a first, security on voting day was not taken care by the Bihar police but by paramilitary forces. Additional Chief Electoral Officer R. Lakshman said there were no reports of any untoward incident.
2 बूथ है, दोनों बूथों पर एक पे CISF है, एक पे CRPF है। पुख्ता इंतजाम है।
अभी 42% के लगभग ओवरऑल पोलिंग हो चुकी है। मतदान मोर और लेस पीसफुल रहा है, सिवाय 1-2 इंस्टेंसेस को। 2 जगह क्लैशेस के रिपोर्ट मिले हैं, किंतु वो पोलिंग बूथ से काफी दूर हुए हैं और स्थिति नियंत्रण में है।
Of the 49 seats that went to polls in the first phase, Mayawati's Bahujan Samaj Party contested in 41, BJP contested in 27, RJD in 17, LJP in 13, Congress in 8, RLSP in 6, 3 by the HAMS, CPI in 25 and CPIM in 12. A total number of 1.35 crore electors were eligible to cast their votes for 49 assembly seats, for which 583 candidates including 54 women contested.
डाल लिया वोट, मताधिकार का प्रयोग किया, मुझे खुशी है और मैं चाहता हूं कि देश में अब एक कानून हो और मतदाताओं के जागरूकता का विशेष अभियान चल ही रहा है और चले।
जनता सेक्युलरिज्म के झंडे के नीचे खड़ी होगी, वहां पे महागठबंधन को जिताएगी, उसी की सरकार बनाएगी।
Voting came to an end at 3 p.m. in 9 constituencies. Polling in 4 constituencies ended at 4 p.m. and polling for the remaining 36 constituencies ended at 5 p.m. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha Television.
Now let's go across to our correspondent Vishal Dheya, who joins us live from the newsroom with the latest as far as the numbers and the stats that are coming out of these elections in Bihar. Vishal, what are the latest numbers that are coming in as far as the voter turnout and as far as star candidates in this phase, who's in the fray?
Well, Ishan, the numbers which are in as of now the figures which have been collated till 5 p.m. By the Election Commission officials, and the numbers which we have say that the overall polling so far, and to say 5 p.m. You can add or subtract 15 to 20 minutes. The percentage of people who have come out and voted is somewhere around 52%, but that's subject to correction because there will be another figure which will be coming in at around 6 p.m. and then there will be a revised figure as well. But going by the report from the ground, from several polling booths where people are or rather were in the queue before the stipulated time of the polling came to an end, it would not be sort of wrong to say that the polling percentage for the first phase might hover somewhere around 54-55%. But then one very interesting figure which is emerging out of these this poll percentage throughout these 10 districts is the uniformity of the voters who have come out. Most of the constituencies and almost in all districts, the percentage, the polling percentage is hovering somewhere around 50%, and the maximum number of voters who have come out to cast their vote has been from Khagaria district, and specifically from the Alauli constituency. There's somewhere around 60 to 63% voters have come out and vote. That's one constituency wherein LJP Chief Ramvilas Paswan's brother Pashupati Paras is contesting elections. And following very closely is Jamui constituency in Nawada district, and so on and so forth. So these figures are a clear indication that people have finally voted out, come out and voted in large numbers. More than 50% is something which was considered, a sort of a better show in these areas.
All right, Vishal, you've been traveling across Bihar in the run-up to these elections, and we've noticed what a vitriolic campaign it finally came down to be between both the sides, the Grand Alliance and the BJP. But as far as this particular region, Seemanchal, is concerned, these 49 seats are concerned, how did they do traditionally, and how are they trying to change their strategy this time around?
Well, if you look at these 49 seats which went to polls in the first phase, Ishan, then the Grand Alliance, that's RJD, JDU and Congress, had an upper hand in terms of the numbers they garnered in the last elections, that's in 2010 assembly elections. But another very interesting part of these statistics in these elections is that last time around, despite the fact that the JDU...
Vishal, I'll just ask you to hold on for a minute over here because we have to go across to the Election Commission, which is holding a press conference about the latest figures for Bihar. Let's listen.
During the process of poll, 16 control units were replaced and 18 balloting units were replaced. The Commission had made a very intensive arrangement for the observers. In this phase, there were 2,600 micro observers were deployed, and 22 micro expenditure observers were deployed. For all the assembly constituencies, general observers were deployed. Then every district there was one police observer, and there were more than 10 awareness observers were deployed. And of every 2 to 3 assembly constituency, the expenditure observers were also deployed. During this phase, the total polling personnel, more than 63,000 polling personnel were deployed, and more than 55,000 police personnel were deployed. Which how many police personnel? More than 55,000. During this phase, a lot of alternative arrangements were also done. Apart from the CPF at every polling location, there were video cameras, Android phones were deployed. At 576 locations, webcasting was also done. There were 339 Android phones were deployed, and 935 video cameras were deployed. Apart from the basic minimum facilities at every polling station, there were 200 model polling stations which were also set up. Approximately 4 to 5 model polling stations with special facilities to the voters in every assembly constituency. During this phase, out of 14,291 arms licenses, the 6,899 arms were deposited this time. 1,650 licenses were cancelled and 152 were impounded. In this phase, more than 10,000 NBWs were executed, and there was an extensive arrangement taken for the free and fair election. In this phase, more than 6,000 vulnerable locations were identified, where at every location the sector officers, the police officers, the senior officers visited. The observers were asked to visit every vulnerable location for the confidence building measure. And the intimidators in every such vulnerable locations were identified, and many preventive actions were also done.
Conference detailing out the goings-on in the first phase of polling that happened in Bihar today. That figure of the exact poll percentage, the voter turnout, the all-critical voter turnout, that will be much analysed. That will be out in a short while from now, and we'll be getting you that as well. Well, staying with election news in Bihar, Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed 2 rallies in the state today, one in Jahanabad and another in Bhabua. Now, Modi launched a scathing attack on Chief Minister Nitish Kumar and RJD Chief Lalu Prasad over the issue of corruption. He accused the 2 leaders of insulting the legacy of Jayaprakash Narayan. The PM was referring to a sting video that surfaced showing senior Bihar Minister Avdesh Prasad Kushwaha accepting a bribe. Kushwaha resigned afterwards.
अगर 4 लाख रुपए की बोली जाती है, हिसाब किताब उस प्रकार से होता है और सरकार में रहते हुए होता है, तो भाइयों बहनों, जयप्रकाश जी को अगर सच्ची श्रद्धांजलि देनी है, इस पाप के साथ जिस राजनीतिक दलों का संबंध है, इस पाप के साथ जिस गठबंधन का संबंध है, पूरे बिहार में चुन करके ऐसे लोगों को साफ कर दो मेरे भाइयों.
Meanwhile, Nitish Kumar addressed a rally in Aurangabad. He attacked the opposition NDA alliance, saying they were busy bickering among themselves. He also attacked the Prime Minister for campaigning in Bihar, saying he wouldn't bother to come back for years if the NDA won.
मैंने चुनाव जीत करके गए तो 14 महीना तो बिहार याद आया नहीं. फिर जब चुनाव नजदीक आ गया तो बिहार टहलने लगे. या तो विदेश जाते हैं या बिहार आते हैं.
Now, the black ink attack on Sudhindra Kulkarni notwithstanding, the launch of former Pakistan Foreign Minister Khurshid Kasuri's book will go ahead as planned. Shiv Sena activists smeared black ink on Kulkarni's face to protest the book launch. The party has since withdrawn the protest.
ये जो तिरंगा है, ये तिरंगे का अपमान है. तिरंगे के आदर्श, तिरंगे के विचार, भारत का लोकतंत्र, इसका अपमान है. और ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए.
Strong words from the chairman of the Observer Research Foundation, Sudhindra Kulkarni. Shiv Sena activists smeared black paint on Kulkarni's face today, protesting the organization of the launch of former Pakistan Foreign Minister Khurshid Mahmood Kasuri's book.
मैं सुन रहा हूं कि जो हुआ है वो सौम्य हुआ है, वो माइल्ड हुआ है. इससे ज्यादा भी हो सकता है. मैं ज्यादा भी हुआ तो उसके लिए मैं तैयार हूं.
Shiv Sena has since withdrawn the protest. The withdrawal came after a meeting between Sena Chief Uddhav Thackeray and Maharashtra Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis. The Chief Minister has promised security to the book launch function.
We have a right to disagree on any issue, but the way to protest in a particular manner which harms somebody, other person's interest, that is not good.
जो घटना हुई है उसमें ऑफेंस रजिस्टर कर रहे हैं और आगे जो भी है कार्रवाई हम करने वाले हैं.
The attack on Kulkarni has drawn sharp criticism from several political parties.
It is not a case of Kulkarni or Kasuri. It is a case of the liberal democratic ethos of India. The only person who must take a lead on this is the Prime Minister. Unfortunately, he has maintained a stoic and eloquent silence for months.
It is nothing but counter-revolution, nothing but subversion, and they want to subvert the secular democratic polity of the country. They want to denounce the constitution which has been given to us by Dr. Ambedkar and galaxy of leaders.
Kasuri's book, Neither a Hawk Nor a Dove, an insider's account of Pakistan's foreign policy, was unveiled in Delhi recently. The launch in Mumbai happened on Monday. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now, Kashmiri poet Gulab Nabi Khyal joined the ranks of over a dozen authors to return his Sahitya Academy Award. The wave of protest started less than a week ago after Nayanthara Sehgal returned her award to protest what she called an assault on India's diversity. The Academy has called for an emergency meeting later this month after 16 writers now have joined the protest. Let's now get you some more national news and updates in Nationwide. Normal life was disrupted in Kashmir due to a trade strike in protest against a petrol bomb attack on a truck in Jammu last week. 3 persons, including a policeman, were injured. The police arrested 6 persons for the attack. India and China started a joint military training exercise today that will continue till the 23rd of October at the Kunming Military Academy in China. The aim is to strengthen ties between both armies and complement other exchanges between the two forces. The Supreme Court imposed a pollution surcharge on commercial vehicles entering the National Capital Territory. The Apex Court imposed a surcharge of 700 and 1300 on light and heavy commercial vehicles respectively entering Delhi. However, this is an experimental levy that will be applicable only from the 1st of November 2015 to the 29th of February 2016. Well, time for us to take a very quick break. On the other side, Russian President Vladimir Putin defends the country's operations in Syria, says it aims to stabilize the legitimacy of the authority of the Syrian President Assad. More on that on the other side.
The poll juggernaut rolls out in Bihar. Modi's NDA takes on Nitish's Grand Alliance. Who will win this most important election battle since 2014? Watch Verdict 2015, Monday through Saturday on Rajya Sabha television.
Welcome back. You're watching the news at 6. Now, President Pranab Mukherjee arrived in Ramallah today for a day-long visit. He is the first Indian head of state to visit the country. Earlier, before wrapping up his visit to Jordan, the president underlined India's unwavering support to Palestine's demand for a separate state and a solution to its conflict with Israel through dialogue.
Hours before beginning his visit to Palestine, President Pranab Mukherjee outlined India's policy towards West Asia. The president said that India will continue to support separate statehood for Palestine, but also committed to build strong bilateral ties with Israel. He refused to club its ties with the two countries despite the ongoing conflict. President's visit comes amid fresh clashes in the region. He urged the two sides to resume talks that have been stalled since September last year to resolve the crisis.
Like Jordan, India's traditional support to the Palestinian cause remains steadfast and unwavering, while we pursue strong relations with Israel. Our bilateral relations with Israel are independent of our relations with Palestine. India supports a negotiated solution resulting in a sovereign, independent, viable and united state of Palestine with East Jerusalem as its capital, living within secure and recognized borders.
Earlier, the president urged investors in Jordan to contribute in FDIs in several sectors. He said the targeted bilateral trade between India and Jordan is $5 billion in the next 10 years. The bilateral trade between the two nations crossed $2 billion last year.
India seeks greater foreign direct investment in the insurance, construction, defense production, and various sectors. We have opened up these sectors through policies that will encourage investors.
After the day-long visit to Palestine, the president will begin the last leg of his 6-day visit to Israel. The highlight of the president's visit to Israel will be his address to its parliament, Knesset, which is a rare honor for any visiting leader. He will also hold talks with Israeli President Reuven Rivlin and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. MOUs in the fields of culture, education, science and technology will be signed during President's visit to Israel. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now, KP Sharma Oli has been sworn in as the new Prime Minister of Nepal. Oli becomes the 38th Prime Minister of the Himalayan Kingdom, which has of late been reeling under violent protests by a section of the Madhesi population. It's a crucial time for Oli as he faces a daunting task of ending the week-long protest and restoring trade ties with India.
KP Sharma Oli being sworn in as the new Prime Minister of Nepal. He was administered the oath of office by President Ram Baran Yadav. Two Deputy Prime Ministers, Bijay Kumar Gachadar and Kamal Thapa, were also sworn in. The two leaders belong to groups protesting against the new constitution. This is allegedly their reward for supporting Oli's election in parliament. While Thapa heads Nepal's only royalist party, the Rashtriya Prajatantra Party Nepal, Gachadar is the chairman of the Madhesi Rights Forum Democratic, which chose to break away from the ongoing anti-constitution agitation by the Madhesi community in the southern Tarai Plains. The new government promises to end the violence that has paralyzed the country for nearly 3 weeks, even as the agitating Madhesis refuse to budge. The new government faces the daunting task of restoring disrupted imports of essential commodities from India and end the diplomatic standoff with the country. Another big challenge is to rebuild the quake-hit regions of the country. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Now, the Nobel Prize for Economics has been awarded to US-British national Angus Deaton for his work on consumption, poverty and welfare. The 69-year-old is a leading microeconomist, best known for his study of the choices of individual consumers. While announcing the award, the Nobel Committee said Professor Deaton has enhanced the understanding of individual consumption choices to design economic policy that promote welfare and reduce poverty. He is the 76th economist to be honored with the prize since it was first awarded in 1969. The prize is 8 million Swedish krona. The Russian President Vladimir Putin admitted that Russian airstrikes in Syria are aimed at helping the Assad regime. Speaking to state-run television, Putin said he hopes to create conditions for a political solution in the war-torn country. European Union leaders expressed concerns over Putin's revelation as the fight in Syria is against the Islamic State. They're discussing the Syrian crisis in Luxembourg.
И наша задача, я хочу теперь вернуться к тому вопросу, который вы задали, заключается в том, чтобы стабилизировать законную власть и создать условия для поиска политического компромисса.
Vladimir Putin openly affirming that Russian airstrikes in Syria are an attempt to secure its president Bashar al-Assad.
Военным путем, конечно, но когда рядом со столицей стоят подразделения международных террористов, ИГИЛ и же с ними, то тогда, наверное, никакого желания договариваться с властями Сирии.
Putin also sought support from Saudi Arabia, Moscow's biggest attempt so far to reach out to the enemies of Assad.
الإصرار على عدم وجود أي دور لبشار الأسد في مستقبل سوريا والاستمرار في تقديم الدعم للمعارضة السورية المعتدلة كما تم بحث أفكار جديدة.
The European Union said interventions in Syria should be clearly against the Islamic State and other terrorist groups as defined by the UN. EU foreign ministers are meeting in Luxembourg to discuss the Syrian crisis and Assad's future role in the country.
We cannot work with Assad
as the long-term solution for the future of Syria. We can be flexible about the manner of his departure, we can be flexible about the timing of his departure, but if we try to work with Assad, we will only drive the opposition into the arms of ISIL, the very opposite of the outcome that we want.
On the ground, Russian forces have stepped up their military campaign. Russia said its planes had flown 64 sorties, struck 63 targets, and destroyed 53 fortified positions in the last 24 hours. Reports suggest Syrian forces have made significant advances against rebels, a great cause of worry for the West. Bureau Report, Rajya Sabha TV.
Well, that's all from us. Goodbye.